All right. Well, hello, Dani.
Hello, Leslie.
I'm talking today with Dani. She's a friend of mine, and we homeschool together, and well, not exactly together, but like separately together.
Mhm.
And we recently have had a couple of conversations with people on this channel about homeschooling and education in the context of everything we've been discussing. And I thought it would be really great to have a conversation with Dani about this because we've spent a lot of time talking about all aspects of home education, pros and cons, lots of the trials and tribulations,
Mhm.
and it's an interesting and complex subject, and a lot of families are making the choice to homeschool these days for a variety of reasons. And I thought that Dani would be a great person to have a conversation with that about. So thank
Mhm.
you so much for having a conversation with me, Dani.
Yeah, of course. Definitely. Part of life.
Yeah,
Big
yeah,
part.
big part for sure.
Yeah.
And could you start by tell a little bit about yourself and your family and how you, I guess, how you came to, well, it's a big question, how you came to decide to homeschool, but like
Yeah. I could
maybe
talk for
just
an
start with
hour
just
about
talk
that.
about, yeah, set the
Sure.
scene.
Set the scene,
Yeah.
context. Sure. Well, I have three kids and they're all elementary school aged, but so 8, 8, and 9. I have two boys and a girl. And back, where did it begin? Homeschooling. We have different reasons and they've changed over time, of course, but in the beginning was really my not being sure if I could put my kids in preschool in the state that we were living in. I had some issues with how they were being treated on playgrounds and how they were being treated by their peers already before we even got into the preschool age. And then when we were looking into the preschool, different preschools, how expensive they were. It was just crazy to think about spending more on my toddler's preschool than I was spending on college. And I don't know if it was just specific to our state or if that's like it is everywhere. I honestly don't know how people afford preschools. Um, so I had a friend who let me know that it's okay to homeschool preschool. It's okay to keep them out of preschool. You're not a bad mom for that. And me growing up in the normal public school setting, I always imagined myself having kids and, walking them to school every day and, saying bye bye as they walked away and then coming and picking them up in the afternoon. And that was going to be like our life. That was going to be our fulfilled life. And didn't really think of it any other way but that. And so it took a lot of unlearning and like re examining our, what I wanted for our kids. So when a friend told me it's okay, you're not a bad mom to keep your kids out of preschool. You're not going to, harm them. You can teach ABCs and one, two, threes. Like you're capable of doing that. So it gave me the confidence to just forget the whole preschool setting situation and had them at home with me. And at the time they were all little toddlers, so it was like I had my own little classroom full of kids, like my own little three, and we went on their paces for everything. So once I got the confidence to do that, then it just naturally became like, okay, well, I don't really need to put them into a situation where maybe they're not ready for this or that. And I was worried at the time about, again, still like how they were going to be treated when I'm not there to advocate for them. That was a big
Mhm.
concern of mine. So, um, so we just kept going and rolling with it. I think back then I pushed a lot of, we'd sit and practice writing and we'd have I try to like make school at home like school in
Mhm.
public school. And it's a journey. Like it takes time to kind of break yourself of the expectations of what schooling is supposed to look like for children. And so by the time they were, 6, 7, I was like fully confident that I could handle their learning styles and provide them the information that they needed and the experiences that I felt were going to be good for them. Um, so yeah, that was like the beginning reasons, mostly. And it is such a joy, and it's been such a wonderful experience having the experience of having my children with me along this process. If as they get interested in different things, like we can explore things as we want, And there's so much less pressure and feelings of shame involved in life. Like, I look at other folks that have kids in public school system. I look back at my experiences as a public school kid, and if you weren't, meeting a certain expectation, there was always that level of um, not good feelings that came with that as well. I mean, teachers try to help children go along, but at the same time, like, only I can provide them what they need at the time,
Mhm.
know their capabilities, and know what they're ready to know, what they're ready to understand. And in a
Mhm.
group setting, it's, there are children who aren't maybe ready for certain things, or maybe are more advanced than their peers, and they want to move up along a certain topic a little faster than they would normally.
Mhm.
um, I also saw the school system, I kind of see, like I said, it's a little journey, and over time my perspectives have changed. I've taken in information and made my opinions, pretty strongly about the time that kids spend in school, the complete waste of time that they are given every day, um, waiting for other kids in line, waiting for everyone to wash their
Mhm.
hands before they can do this. Like, all those minutes add up, and it's doing things that they don't want to be doing. And there's so
Mhm.
much more to be exploring and learning. And um, what are we doing? Like, why does it take so long for everything? So the amount of time that they're spending in classes, sitting, waiting for a teacher to prepare something, waiting for something to get graded, waiting for their peers to be quiet, or for, distractions to settle. Um, and we have that on our own, but it's on a small scale. There's always going to be little things where it's like, okay, let's get on the same page here, but and there's only three of them. It's manageable.
Mhm.
And then with all that extra time, we do things that we actually care about doing, and follow our own interest, and
Mhm.
spend time outside, and have freedom, which is
Mhm.
like huge to me now. I don't
Mhm.
think back in the beginning that freedom had anything to do with my reasons, and from the beginning. But looking back, I'm just like, I'm so incredibly grateful for the amount of time that we have saved, and the freedom we have to use our time how we please. And at the end of the day, going to bed knowing that we've all grown, we've all learned, we've all loved and conflicted and communicated. And, it's all the boxes get checked every day, and it's on our time, not someone else's. So that's really important to me too.
It sounds like in the beginning it was you were you were you were reluctant to imagine your life going this direction because you had such a picture of what you
Yep.
expected to be doing as a mom,
Hmm.
and it involved this pretty little picture of walking the kids to school,
Yeah.
dropping them off, doing your own thing, and then getting your happy kids back at the end of the day,
Oh
all
yeah.
nicely educated.
As if they
And
would just come home happy and full of life,
yeah,
and not like kicked down in any sort of way, and
yeah.
had any conflict with anyone at school that day, that then I
Hmm.
have to you know, find out what happened while I wasn't there,
Hmm.
and how this happened, and then communication with teachers and communication with other
Yeah.
parents. And that whole system just seems like so detached from real human life. And I believe that's designed now at this point in my journey of
Hmm.
homeschooling.
So you've
um
really come to see it differently
oh
over
yeah.
this as you've gone through this process. You Yeah, I like how you kinda talked about, and I sort of think about it as, like, deinstitutionalizing your mindset, really,
Yeah.
around school. Do you have to when you homeschool, do you have to perform school at home? Do you have to do everything that they do at home the same way that they do it
Yeah.
at school? And is there a
No.
reason why they do things the way that they do them? And there is, but does it have to translate to what you're doing? And so as you've gone through this, you've moved from kind of changing the first letting go of the picture you had of life
Yep.
and going through that, but then it sounds like as you've come to this point, you've really just seen more and more benefits, and you are more and more convinced that you're doing the right thing
Hmm.
for your family by making this choice.
Yeah, even if we have hard days that are a struggle and whatnot, but that's our struggle to have. Like, why
Mhm.
send my kid to school to struggle somewhere else where I'm not there to help them through that, whatnot, whatever the issue, and helping them grow from that, rather than stifling whatever that issue might have been. I don't feel that there's as much room to be human in a setting where there's so many people that they have to worry about, that, individuals get, fallen through the crack. And I think that's, many people understand that,
Mhm.
see that as an issue, and they probably try to cope with that problem in school settings. And, there's counselors and there's people there to continue the indoctrination,
Yeah. Yeah.
but push different things on different ideas. And um, values too have become very important to me, and realizing that I don't share the values that our greater society share. There are
Mhm.
things that are important to me that I don't necessarily want things being put on my kids, and having them subjected to things that I'm not wanting to have to explain, or
Mhm.
have them come home and me have to give them a slightly different version, or different, some context behind what their takeaways from that day.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't, yeah. So seeing how their lives would be if they were in a public school system versus how they are now, there's
Mhm.
so much more room for them to be who they were designed to be connected to the earth and connected to their intuition, not have their personalities stifled and shamed. And I guarantee you that the school systems have a lot of these funny or fun phrases, and be da, 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 da. Like, there's all these good things that they want to say, that, you read their mission statements, you're like, yeah, that sounds peachy. But does it work on a grand scale? No. I feel like there's all these different personalities and directions and life experiences to be had. And there's only one path when you take your kid and put them in public school.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they're all going to be put down that same path, whether they like it or not. And some kids do great on that
Mhm.
path. That's
Mhm.
the path that they fit along. That's great. Um, but it's not for everybody. And I
Mhm.
can see how my individual children, their own in their own different ways, would have been altered, their personalities and their ambitions and things that are interesting to them. They would
Mhm.
not be able to follow those paths on their own in the school system like that. There's not much room for that. And I'm sure that there are some teachers who encourage children to, follow their dreams. And they might say that, but at the same time, at the end of the day, they all have to fit through this hole, like a
Mhm.
funnel. Like, they have to
Mhm.
get funneled in, and
Mhm.
any outliers will get caught up, brought in, brought down, knocked down, to fit into this, whether or not they like it. And so no wonder there are so many children that have, issues with
Mhm.
depression and anxiety. It doesn't work for them, and they know it on like a cell level, and
Mhm.
yet they're stuck in the system, and whether their parents are in tune with that or not. So
Mhm.
if I had followed my little picture perfect idea, we would have a whole set of problems, a whole nother set of problems that we'd be dealing with on a daily basis. Spend 7 hours
Mhm.
in school, come home, do 2 hours of homework. Where's the time for family? Where's the time for themselves? Just to take the time to explore on their own. It just doesn't, it's not healthy. And I
Mhm.
think that is, part of the design is to not allow people to be their best, healthiest, intuitive selves.
Mhm.
It's not designed for that. It's designed to have workers and consumers,
Right.
and keep people in the same sort of thinking, same sort of mindset, and any outliers are discouraged.
You know,
Like I said, there's
that
probably
is
some
so
good
interesting
teachers.
what you're saying there. I think that's something I didn't realize at all until studying the history and the purpose of the
Mm,
compulsory schooling system, that it really is it's not an extreme statement to say, it just really is the purpose of it, to create
mhm,
people um who are able to conform to a workforce and consumer based society. It really is in order
yeah,
to get people to all fall in line.
yeah,
And a lot of those time wasters you talk about, like standing in line and waiting your turn. It's good to learn those kind of things because
sure,
we have to do that in the world. But
yeah,
they spend hours a day for 12 years doing that,
yeah,
hours a day learning that. And so it's really like it's kind of the most reinforced lesson of the school system is conformism.
yeah. And at the
And
end of their high school career or
Mhm.
whatnot, like, how many students actually know what direction they want to go in? I know I
Mhm.
did not. I
Mhm.
had an idea because I went and took some college classes afterwards, and all the tests that I took, I could not name the types of tests I took at the time that direct you into the jobs that work best for you and your personality and all that, your work ethic and all. And everything told me that I was going to be an accountant.
Mhm.
Can you imagine me as an accountant? I think I could probably
I think
pull the
you'd be a
job
good at
off.
accountant. You're pretty organized.
Yeah, I could pull it off. I'm not so organized with my own
Ugh,
self, but I think I could do it for other people and get
yeah.
paid for it.
Yeah.
So it would have been a job. It would have been a 9 to 5. And, I'd come home and watch Netflix and help my kids with their homework. Like that was
Yeah.
probably going to be
Yeah.
life. And now I'm on a totally different trajectory in life, and I'm happy and my kids are happy. And I don't know if we followed that other route, how actually happy we would be.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so,
Yeah, I
yeah.
I wonder, and it really sounds like for you, at least up to this point, it's been a very good experience, very gratifying, and you're really happy with how this is working out in your family and with the choices that you're making and have made around schooling. And I think I wonder what you, well, I guess there are a lot of reasons why people might be reluctant or hesitant to consider homeschooling their kids. And I can think of some of them, like social interaction is one. They want their kids to have social interaction. I know we have our kids are very well socialized,
Well,
but
yes, they are.
we can get into that. But
Yeah, let's do
um,
that.
we, uh, if you are picturing that your kid's whole social group is in their school, that's where they engage with their friends, and you're thinking, I'm concerned about some of the things they're being taught in school, or I'm concerned that my kid's not flourishing in school,
Mhm.
or I don't like that my school kept masks on the kids for a really long time. And I've been thinking about homeschooling, but if I pull my kid out, they're just going to be at home and all their friends are still at school. And I don't
Mm,
want that for my kid. I mean, I think that could be a really, and I hear that from parents. It's a really daunting thing to think
sure.
about doing that. And it does take a little bit of effort to get out there and build connections. But
Mhm.
um, I guess just maybe we just start with that one. What can you talk about what your experience has been like with building connections and homeschooling
Mhm.
as part of a bigger community, and how well socialized do you think your kids are?
Yeah, I think there's like a whole reverse, like underground. I wouldn't. It's not underground. We're very much above ground. Group of people who may not see everything exactly like I see it, but for different reasons have taken their kids, either not ever put them in school systems because they saw it, from an early age, or if they didn't want certain things. Everybody has different reasons, but there is such a network of homeschoolers in every state, and the resources are plentiful. And if you're not a great person at going and making social connections for your kids, like there are plenty of co-ops and groups and play groups, and you start somewhere and you might find one or two connections and build on that. And we've moved a couple of times, so we've had to kind of start our community, get into a community, build community more than once. And um, it does feel daunting, even for someone who's confident in their homeschool capabilities. I could empathize with folks that started off their regular school journey in the public school system and are having to pull their kids out and change lifestyles, um, out of the blue, or maybe they've planned for it, or maybe during 2020 they just refused certain things and they had no choice to get their kids out of the, what do they call it, it's not school and it's not homeschool, the
Oh, the
the
school at
distance
home
learning.
thing that they were doing.
The
Yeah,
distance learning,
yeah.
yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
not homeschool. And
Mm-mm.
so
No.
parents have that experience of like, well, if I did that, then I'd be responsible for this, like, homeschool based, like home based schooling. It's not the same as homeschooling, and there's
Mm-hmm.
different routes and different styles and whatnot. But finding one or two people that you can link arms with, that you kind of see, you want to build friendships with and see their kids, there's a connection there. And link arms with those few people, and before you know it, you've got 10 or 15 families that are all kind of going in the same direction and leading their children similarly. And friendships, bonds are made. And the school friendships, I had friends. I still have friends to this day who I made second grade, third grade. Not to say that those aren't real friendships, but when you're given the opportunity to connect outside of like a forced environment, um, you're able to be your own person and connect in a better, I feel like in a better way. So the school friendships that go from year to year, they change classes every year. You have peers and they're great for what they are, but what I've found and seen in my own kids is we have friendships that we can build on, and relationships that we can build on year after year after year. And we're going on 5 years in the state, and the friendships that we've made are like lifelong
Mhm.
potential. And not just because we sit next to each other.
Mhm.
We have real human connection, and we have our own self motivation to build those friendships and build those relationships that we expect to last a long time. So
Mhm.
in school, I'm sure, yeah, it's not impossible to make friends that you have for your life, but um not everybody that you're going to be a peer with is going to be your buddy. and
Mhm.
and and in our community too, not every single child jives with every other child, but we're still giving our kids that experience to work with and be around, and have some conflict resolution and work
Mhm.
on our friendships, and talk about those things after play dates, and work on how we interacted, and how this went, how that went. And but I get to be there to witness the interactions and help with that conflict if there
Mhm.
is one, or build that smiling happy friendship with them, and smile along with them as they're excited, talking about their best friends, and talking, it's
Mhm.
joyful, and it's
Mhm.
not forced, and it
Mhm.
feels right. And community has been huge for
Mhm.
me, and my ability to continue homeschooling and getting the support that I need,
Mhm.
and encouragement, and confidence to continue. And I mean, at this point, there is no alternative. Even
Mhm.
if we had a bad day, and I can fantasize about, like, yeah, like what would it be like if I had 8 hours to myself each day? But that's not good for them.
Yeah.
That might be good for me for one day. That just means I need a break,
Mhm.
and take that day slower, and go outside and just say, forget all this, we're going to the lake. But to
Yeah.
have the freedom to say, forget this, we're going to the lake. Or on a
Yeah.
Tuesday or a Wednesday, being like, we're going to go to Mima's house after our play group today,
Mhm.
and go spend, that's my mom, go
Yeah.
spend 3 days at my mom's house and explore her backyard, explore her town, explore her parks. And if we were tied down to a public school setting,
Mhm.
that's not as it's not encouraged. It's not really
No.
even allowed to
Right.
go and leave. You'd be truant. They'd get you on that. So
Yeah.
freedom.
Yeah. Well, and going back to what you were saying about the way you're kind of giving a description of the sorts of friendships you can create in school, I it seems to me that, and I had two kids that went through the public school system. I went through the public school system, and then I have two kids that are homeschooling.
Mhm.
And so the kinds of friendships you tend to build in school, there's a lot of shallow acquaintances. There are a lot of people that, like you said, you sit next to each other in a class, maybe you smile at each other, or maybe you feel
Mhm.
weird about each other, or whatever it is, but it's like there's some distance there. And then you might have a couple that you connect with that are good enough friends that you hang out after school, or spend some time with, and really build a friendship that lasts a long time. And that's really special and great. And the contrast, if you are able to get connected in a homeschooling group, and you can, because like you said, there are so many people doing this right
Yep.
now. There are networks everywhere. Um, you can watch their friendships develop in a much more organic, sort of fluid way. And in our we've been friends for about 3 years or so, 3,
A
4
little more,
years,
but yeah,
something like
about,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
something like that. Our kids have been steadily seeing each other for, around 3 years since we started our once a week group that we do.
Yep.
And then we have, in this larger community has overlapping groups. So there's some people that meet like on every Thursday, and there's a bunch of overlap there.
Mhm.
And there's people who meet every Wednesday. There's people who do sports together on the weekends. And these are big groups of people. I mean, we're talking like many families in
Mm-hmm.
this I think in our group alone, there's like 42 people in our
Families,
channel
42
that, yeah.
families. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's like a core of them who always show up, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of variety of people, but you've got this core group of people with, and it's something like 16 kids that see each other at least once a week, sometimes more.
Yeah.
And the way that they get to play and interact, it's not like in a classroom where you have 20 acquaintances and 2 friends. It's like they really do have 16 friends.
Yeah.
And like you said, there are sometimes squabbles between kids or kids that don't get along as well, but
Yeah. Part of life.
yeah, it's part of life. And
Mm-hmm.
we uh, one thing, like, we are there to supervise, but we supervise from a distance. And so I feel like they actually have more room to be free than they
Mm-hmm.
would if they were being supervised by a teacher, or like
An authority figure. Yeah.
yeah, like in this really like structured 20-minute recess kind of way.
Yeah. A
So
thing about too that made me think when you're speaking there is how when you're homeschooling and you have a network of families like this, there are various ages that you're getting to be,
mhm,
working with on a weekly basis. You're learning from, you're teaching to the children themselves have their own thing worked out. And the older ones hanging out with the younger ones. I think
mhm,
my daughter, who's 8, her best friend's 11,
mhm,
and she can learn, and there's a teaching and a learning within the children. And they learn so much from each other. It's amazing. The little stories I hear after play dates and groups meetings, they are learning so much more from each other than they probably would in some circumstances. So,
mhm,
and when children are like given the opportunity to do so and the freedom to do so, like working within outside of their age,
mhm,
there's a lot more to learn from one another. And when
mhm,
you're all in the same age group, I remember the day that I explained to my oldest son how the kids that go to public school, that they are subject like separated by their age group.
mhm,
And the look on his face, he actually came to tears thinking about how awful that would be, knowing that many of his friends are not his exact age.
mhm,
And the friendships and the richness that he has had from children younger than him, older
mhm,
than him,
mhm.
the experiences that he's had, knowing that that would not be the same. You're kind of looking around at each other. You all have had the same sort of amount of life experience. What is there to really learn from one another in that sort of sense?
Mhm.
You're looking up at an authority figure. You're getting all of your information from that person rather than each other. At least give them the opportunity to learn from each other and see it's like magic,
Yeah,
what they pick from each other, what they take away each day. It's amazing and
that's such a
very
good point.
organic.
Yeah, the age thing is, it's a really good point, because it is so rigid in school. You're in such a rigid age-based cohort that it's like the 4th graders, they can't be friends with the 5th graders because the
Oh
5th
yeah.
graders are too cool, but they wouldn't dare, think about being friends with the 3rd graders because they're just little kids.
Hmm.
They wouldn't want to do that. And so
Yeah.
with the group of kids that we're watching, I don't they're all different. Their friendships really don't seem like the age matters at all. You'll see
Right.
an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old, like you
Hmm.
said, or being buddies and running around playing together the
Yeah.
same way that you see 2 9-year-olds or an 8 and a 9-year-old. And
Yeah.
yeah, it is a really good point.
Yeah. And then the confidence and the joy that also when you're a 9-year-old and you're hanging out with a 6-year-old and you're teaching them things that they haven't quite got to, that's confidence building and reinforcing as well the things that they have picked up along the way. They sharing that experience with someone younger than them. I mean, that's a great experience that most public school kids, yeah, they're not going to get that. So even on the playground, well, from my understanding, the playground setting is separated by age as well. They send one class out at a time
Mm,
to do their recesses. At least I
mhm,
know that's how it was in 2021 when they went back to school. It wasn't like, okay, it's recess time now, everybody go for 15 minutes and maybe you'll make a friend who's 2 grades younger than you. I don't see that happening anymore.
mm,
They're
mhm,
out there with their same aged peers all the time. And the thought maybe of hanging out with a kid 3 years younger than them, it's not as exciting. It's not as fun. It's not encouraged. So why try kids
mhm,
that age?
mhm,
So yeah, freedom to have friends of all ages and learn from each other and, once a week, twice a week, we go out, have group settings, they run around and play. We go to a park and they're in the forest. You
Mhm.
know, they spend 10 minutes on the playground and then they're off in the woods on the sides, the bushes, if there's the
Mhm.
trees and
Or in the
whatnot.
water
It's
if
they all have
they can wade into
sticks.
the water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
play. So it's it's fun for them.
Mhm.
They get a lot more engagement out of it. And
Mhm.
so we have our one group and then we have another group on Thursdays that's more of a nature-based group. And then
Mhm.
we're looking into a Monday, Friday one, like specific to our town, because I kind of look around. I have only really one friend that lives in my own town. A
Mhm.
lot of us come from other little within the
We're
same
around the
county.
county, yeah.
Yeah, around the county. So I'm looking into like a group that's more local, and my kids, they kind of like, they're not as super excited about that right now. But my goal
Mhm.
with that is to get them into a more of a tabletop setting, indoor, outdoor, but learning from their peers. I
Mm.
assured them that I was going to stand back and let them do and learn from each other and
So it's a more
encourage each other.
structured and educational
Yeah,
program
but
then?
just to
Okay.
give them a an opportunity to sit and write and draw with peers and see how we've had in our group where the kids bring their notebooks,
Mhm.
and the type of art and drawing and cursive that they learn from just sitting with their friends on a park table
Mhm.
and drawing and writing together, even if it's a half hour, is I feel more beneficial to them than what I can provide them sitting at
Mhm.
our counter saying,
Mhm.
okay, you have to write me a sentence. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I want to encourage that peer learning as much as I can. So this
Yeah.
Monday, this one that will be should be on Mondays. It'll
Mm.
be more of that type
That's
of
really cool.
weekly environment. But kids that are from kindergarten through older, like through like
Mhm.
fourth grade, some older siblings are around, which
Mhm.
is fantastic. Like my middle son, my younger son really likes the kids that are older than him as far as like learning from. He's just a little bit more advanced socially and
Mhm.
can communicate pretty well. And so he has no issues when he goes out and plays with 12-year-olds. Um, so if I can get him at a table setting with some 12-year-olds, he will learn more from them than he could from me
Mhm.
in
That
at his
yeah,
age.
that's really cool. You're kind of finding a creative way to work with that. And that brings me to like another question that I had for you, which is, well, I guess it's another obstacle, another issue that parents have when they think about homeschooling that keeps them from being excited about doing it.
Mhm.
Um, being able to provide discipline and adequate education. I think a lot of people are afraid that they won't know how to
Mm.
give their kids what they need in terms of knowledge and what does how did you decide what kind of curricula you were going to use and what kind of learning style you wanted to promote
Yeah.
and yeah.
Well, at the beginning, I was, like I said, I was trying to imitate a school setting, trying to give them workbooks, and I was buying reading curriculum for them, starter books and things like that. So we have books around the house all the time. They have access to reading and writing and art and music and you name it. It's all out and available to them at any given time. Um, I sort of backed off the structure where I would be like, okay, guys, we're going to sit at the table now for an hour, and this is what we're going to do. I probably do that very, like maybe once a month, where I'm like, guys, we're going to have to, and that's more my way of seeing where they're at with things and
Mhm.
how they've been developing kind of more independently. So, independent learning throughout the majority of the time, and then and being productive on a daily basis, like making sure we're being productive. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're having to do a certain set of time each day. It's a lot of freedom, and for some folks that's just too much. But because there's so many styles of homeschooling and so much curriculum out there, there's a lot to explore. Maybe that's overwhelming for folks, but um I have found over the time that we've been doing this that I've become a little bit more and more like hands off and
Mhm.
allowing them to explore things that they want to be in, what they're interested in at the time, and I will provide them resources and research and materials that help them kind of explore the things that they're interested in at the time. And how does that compare to like a typical third grader? I really don't know, but most of me doesn't care because it's
Mhm.
sort of intuitive and it's allowing them to giving them the opportunities to explore different ideas and helping them along that way. So it's a dedication of time of my own and my own energy, being that role, playing that role of homeschool mom. But
Mhm.
we go on a lot of field trips and we have a lot of, outside the home learning. So we'll go on walks and take our backpacks with us, and the kids all have their notebook and their pens and their snacks and water, and we just kind of leave, assuming the weather's nice, and we'll find a place to sit, and they all just start like drawing what their observations are, talking about
Mhm.
observations. It's natural to
Mhm.
learn on our own rather than be adhering to a curriculum, like a weekly curriculum. And
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with having a curriculum that keeps you on track of a
Mhm.
certain subjects. Like there's nothing wrong with that at all. Um, we've gone from one style to another. So I did a bunch of research maybe in 2019, and led me to several websites, books that was teaching about homeschool styles and the
Mhm.
vast majority of homeschool styles. And people can go and research these types on their own, but one that kind of fit well with what we were already doing and what felt right at the time was the Charlotte Mason way of schooling. And so people can go research what Charlotte Mason is, the eclectic homeschool style, and that led me to unschooling.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
um, for someone who is very in the curriculum, the thought of unschooling might sound crazy because
Mhm.
it's not as structured as they're used to. And if you're going from a public school setting into
Mhm.
homeschooling, you kind of move along,
Yeah.
maybe. At some point,
Unschooling
you might,
sounds like hippie stuff to those
yeah.
people
So
probably.
you might
Yeah.
find something, and it might feel right for a while. You can keep on track with that. That's great.
Mhm.
We do a lot of out loud narrative type learning, or like oral learning, math out loud. We call it out loud math. We can just sit outside and do math, understand math concepts without staring at a book or having a pencil in your hand. There's a
Mhm.
lot to learn, and my kids at least enjoy doing out loud math. It's one
Mhm.
of our favorite little things to do. Um, so yeah, there's just different styles, and it might be overwhelming, but something might fit and click, and
Mhm.
then explore different ways until it feels right. So yeah, going from like a public school setting all the way to unschooling,
Yeah.
there's going to be steps in between to break your comfort level into
Mhm.
making sure that you feel right about what you're providing your kids.
Mhm.
But it kind of takes over my house sometimes. So I've got Legos in one
Mhm.
section and clay over here and paint over there. And we all do beaded art, bracelets and necklaces. So we're crafting, and
Mhm.
but our days are our own days. We get to, we are stewards of our own land. That's another big part of my approach to life in general at this point, that
Mhm.
I feel like if I had not been in that forced education situation, I would have embraced much quicker.
Mhm. Mhm.
There are things that I wish that I look back on as my childhood and realize that like I wasn't being allowed to
Mhm.
explore what probably would have felt right for
Mhm.
me to do at the time, but I wasn't given the opportunity. I mean, we had a home garden, and my mom is a gardener, and I learned a lot from her. But if I was able to be immersed in that, I'd be so much further along in
Mhm.
my own understanding of plants and the earth and soil and compost and raising animals. I mean, I'm just now coming to this full realization of what my purpose in life is to be a steward of the land.
Mhm.
And that's not encouraged necessarily in the
Mhm.
school system. However, there are 4-H and other programs that like help encourage kids, but you have to know what your interests
Yeah.
are before you can follow that interest. And if you're not given the opportunity to figure out what you're into,
Mhm.
you're not going to follow those paths.
It
You're going to,
sounds like for you, a big part of this, something that you really value is that ability to explore your own individual interests and your own passions. And so being able to
sure,
give that to your kids is really important.
yeah,
And for
and help
you,
them along.
unschooling has been that.
Hmm.
Unschooling has really helped you to do that. And
Yeah, unschooling doesn't mean no education.
mhm.
It just means you're not following someone else's curriculum.
Mhm.
And there's other, and like I said, there's lots of people who thrive on a structured curriculum
And we
as a
have some
homeschooler.
friends like that in our
Yeah.
group. We have friends who that our kids play together, and some of them go to a co-op setting or to what is the one they have those like parent partnerships.
Yeah. like
That's one of the
HomeLink
things
and
where,
things like
yeah, it's
that.
HomeLink. It's like
Hmm.
through this, it's through the public school system, but it's
Right.
provided to support homeschoolers
Hmm.
who want to take their kids for certain classes that you can
Hmm.
sign them up for, that they do at a more structured location with a
Yeah.
teacher. And
Yeah.
then
The options are endless
they
with all
are.
that.
And then we have friends who really do sit down with their kids every day and do and go
Hmm.
through their curriculum, and that works really well for their family.
Yep.
So it's kind of um there's a lot of freedom to explore what works best for your
Yeah.
kids. Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to get to the same sort of result. And, it's just different paths it
Do
takes to
you
get there.
Yeah, different paths for sure. I'm really curious about this. I don't think we've ever talked about it. Do you plan to homeschool your kids in middle school and high school, or do you think
Yeah.
that you're going to do something different? Yeah.
No, yeah, I will.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be kind of like how you touched on, there are these classes and these partnerships that are with the public school system or with private
Hmm.
schools that you can take your kids to certain classes. The
Hmm.
city offers classes, art classes is up to all kinds of science-based classes. There's college classes that you can get into as a teenager. So there is education galore. We could get into any kind of program in this as the future, progresses. But for sure, keeping it home based. I think too, my children, by the time that they're teenagers, they have their own entrepreneurial like aspects of their lives. They have their own businesses in mind. They have
Hmm.
their own ideas of what their future is going to look like and what
Hmm.
their teenage years are going to look like. My daughter wants to own a cafe by the time she's 16, and she's already writing her menu, and she serves me in bed and she serves me on the couch. She takes my order. She's very, very self-motivated,
Hmm.
very self-motivated. And all of my children are. And I don't know if that is because they're homeschooled and they're allowed to be self-motivated and follow their own, or if it's just their personalities, but at least they're not being funneled
Hmm.
and kept from exploring those passions. Um, as we get older, I kind of see there being a little bit more independent learning. So they're teaching them how to research, teaching them how to, you don't know what you don't know. So I want them to know that there is just so much out there to understand. There's no shortage of topics and research, directions to go in, and making sure that they know that there is so much out there to understand that they're never going to be bored. They're never going to lose, interest in following their own
Hmm.
path.
Hmm.
And so yeah, by the time they're in high school, I see us doing just a lot more independent learning, research, following their own. If
Hmm.
that takes them to a school setting, if that takes them to college, cool. I can see my oldest son becoming an ecologist or something along those lines. If they
Hmm.
want to go into some, education programs to get them there, then I think that'd be fantastic. I'll
Hmm.
support them. But as far as middle school, like actual public school, middle school, no way,
Yeah.
just no way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then high school, probably even worse.
Yeah.
We go to this one park pretty often, and when the nearby middle school gets out and they all come over to this park, I have to just look at my watch and be aware of the times that the kids get out of school, because it's like a flocking ground of middle schoolers. And I hear the language, I hear the conversations, I watch their dynamic, I watch the way they interact with each other, and I'm just like, hard no. Um,
Do you think that that's the natural way that kids that age would interact, and you just want to shield your kids from it? Or do you
oh,
think there's something particularly like influenced by the school setting that you're recoiling from?
I don't know. It seems like chaos. And I'm sure, given the freedom to go off on their own at the age of 13 in this sort of setting where they're just with a bunch of other kids their age with really no adult supervision, they should have experiences like that where I can see into the future and setting up experiences for them to have that type of time where they're going to have an
Independence?
independence, yes, from
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to want that. They're going to want that. And I will provide that for sure. But gosh, it's just hard to imagine children growing up behaving that way without a system forcing it, forcing those types of personalities.
Because they're
It,
so destructive, or
they're
what is
just,
it?
yeah, destructive with the way that they behave in their language, and
Mm,
the fighting, the
mm,
bullying. I just sit back and I watch a lot of it go on. And even my kids come up to me, they don't want to be there at the park when the kids are there, when those kids are there.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even want to be there.
Yeah.
So maybe they want to shelter themselves from it because they see that that's not
Mm-hmm.
the behavior that kids that age should even be, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So where does
Yeah.
that come from? I have
Yeah.
no idea. And,
That's interesting.
and if I'm sheltering my kids, then cool. I'm okay with sheltering my 8 and 9 year olds at this point, from 13, 14 year olds. But I don't know. There's a
Mm-hmm.
different breed of people that I find in that age range when they're all thrown at a park at the same time
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
run it. And I've talked to the people that run the park and like the maintenance people, and they're just like scratching their heads trying to figure out what is going on with this group of
Wow.
youth.
Okay.
So there's something destructive going on, and I don't know
Mm.
if it's just because they are so all day long in their classrooms, and then they
Mm-hmm.
just get out of this park and unleash on each other and on the landscaping and on the environment. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I
It
hope
doesn't
that's
sound
not
like they're
just an
being
age thing. I hope
taught to respect each other or the
yeah,
property of others.
it's hard to
Yeah.
watch without
Yeah.
interfering.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't
That's interesting.
generally,
It's not
but
a good advertisement for um
the middle school system.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that's really great. That's interesting. I know we have so many options and there's so many other things to talk about around this, but
Yep.
I I really like yeah, I really love your enthusiasm and how much you love doing this. I mean, that
Yeah.
really comes through um and
Yeah,
it
I'm definitely an
sounds
advocate for homeschooling
yeah.
and try to encourage others, try to let them know that it's not as daunting as it might seem in the beginning. I have other friends that have changed their lifestyles and brought in a homeschool, um, turned to homeschooling even prior to 2020.
Mhm.
And I know that they're grateful for the life path that they've taken, whether I had
Mhm.
anything to do with it or not. Um, but I can't say enough about the joy and freedom that we have just knowing the alternative, living and
Yeah.
growing up in the alternative. My husband and I both feel like our time as children was wasted, and the expectations that the school system had on us to perform all day at school, go home, still have homework to do, papers to write, books to read, that wasn't within our interest. In the amount of reading and research that we did on topics that weren't propelling us in any good direction. It was just for what? It seemed like a big waste of time. And I'm sure there's literature and things that's another thing is like the literature and the types of things that we were told to read and write about as kids, as teenagers in high school and whatnot. There's so much more out there to learn and to research, and we're all being forced to read and research the same exact things. What's going to be the outcome? It's going to be sort
Yeah.
of the same. And the
Mhm.
books and things that I was made to read in middle school, high school, I could not tell you about what they were really about. I think that when you're kind of forced to read and write about the same, topics outside of your interests, it's going to go one in one brain cell and out the other,
Mm.
unless you just kind of have that type of brain where everything you're reading and learning is
Mhm.
cemented into your
Mhm.
brain cells. But if it were something that I actually had interest in, it probably would have stuck, and I probably could have built upon that as I
Mhm.
grew and learned more things. But when you're reading the same sort of books, the same,
Mhm.
it's not something that you're interested in. How much of that are you actually learning from?
Yeah.
And giving the opportunity to explore books and writings and readings that are different and more interesting and will stick in your brain and you can build
Mhm.
upon
Mhm.
as time goes on.
Mhm.
So here I am, I'm in my 30s, and I feel like I've learned more in the last 5 years than I
Mhm.
learned in all of my education
Wow.
as a child and through high school. I have self learned so much more and built upon, and I'm still learning. And I kind of feel like I got held back
Mhm.
from this what truly interests me and where I could actually go with my life
Mhm.
on all this. So yeah, it's kind of nice to know at least I'm here now, and
Mhm.
I have my perspective I've got now, and I'm providing my kids with different opportunities and experiences that I didn't have as a kid. Um, So I look at them and I'm just like, I am just so grateful that we are
Mhm.
here and I have the knowledge I have, and we're
Mhm.
on this path we're on, and we've got the community to support and my husband support and our
Mhm.
family
Mhm.
together.
Mhm.
Our family's together. And I think that's
Mhm.
really important too. family values and keeping us together, I think is really important. And we can
I
get
think,
into all that too,
yeah,
because the school
yeah.
system is not designed to keep your family intact. That is not designed that way. It's to
Yeah.
separate the children from their mothers at a super young age. I mean, that's a whole nother
Yeah, that's
direction.
another big one. But yeah, it's great to get your perspective, and I just really love um how much you enjoy what you're doing with your kids and how well this is working for your family. And
Yeah,
so thank you for sharing
of course.
this with me and with everybody who will watch this. And
Hmm.
what further reading would you recommend to people, or what resources would you recommend if somebody is curious? And I guess, and how would you say to get involved in a community if you want to? So
Hmm.
what would be your like just bullet
Sure.
pointed top recommendations?
Yeah. Well, obviously, there's the internet. Um, I have found my community that I'm in now. I started off by going to a single play date that was posted on a homeschool group. So there's plenty of groups out there that have started, and there are groups out there for everybody. So you find yourself into a little group, you connect with a couple people, and before you know it, you've got a whole network. So I think just naturally flowing with gravitating towards people that you feel connected to. I
Mhm.
mean, those connections are there for a reason. I think following those connections are really key. Locking arms with people who you kind of see sort of the same vision. You don't have to agree on obviously everything, of course, but locking arms with at least one or two people, and then before you know it, you'll have a whole network. I think organically it happens if we don't resist.
Mhm.
Um, I I'd say around 2019 was when I started doing my research into how the school system was developed for what purposes. And that led me to John Taylor Gatto. So I bought his book in 2019, one of his books. I actually can do the whole like holding my
Oh,
book up
yeah, that's a great book.
gig,
Dumbing
dumbing
Us
us
Down.
down. So he's passed. John Taylor Gatto is no longer alive, but he has so much teaching, so many teachings and recordings of lectures and speeches and research that he has done, and it's just so fascinating. I just sit there at night and I bead, and I sometimes put on a John Taylor Gatto lecture, and I think to myself, this is so boring to so many people, but I'm so interested and fascinated in learning the history of the education system, and it just puts into like concrete why I we do as a family what we do. And there's no way that I can put my kids in a system that is designed to break them. So kind of learning from people like that, I feel is important. Kind of
Mhm.
understanding the reasons why we do what we do.
Mhm.
His teachings is a big key as to why I do what I do, John Taylor
Mhm.
Gatto.
Mhm.
Um, so, but when I found my little group of people and began to meet new people within the community, and then people are kind of gravitated towards that, especially during 2020, 2021. People were unsure about the systems that their kids were being put in, and they wanted to take their kids out of that distance learning. We grew like exponentially that
Mhm.
year.
So much.
um, so many people who are not okay with the forced masking and the medicalization of our children and the indoctrination of our kids. It became so apparent what was going on, at least to many people, and they don't want anything to do with that for
Mhm.
their kids. And so we collected along the way many, many, many families that we can encourage to empower them, help let them know that they have it within themselves to
Mhm.
educate these little people that you brought into the world. And nothing will bring you more joy than to know at the end of the day that you've kept them from being completely indoctrinated. At least I go to sleep feeling okay, at least at the end of the day, if we didn't like master anything specific that day, that at least we were free and
Mhm.
we were happy and we had a
Mhm.
good day and we worked outside in the yard and we things that bring us joy, went and
Mhm.
swam at the lake or whatever the day called for.
Mhm.
So yeah, finding a good couple people that you gravitate towards and just seeing where that goes and following that, I think is
Mhm.
pretty important.
Mhm. Yeah, and being able to raise your kids within your own value system.
Yeah,
Sounds like that's
big.
a really big one for you.
Yeah,
And me as well. I really, really appreciate talking with you, Dani.
of
Thank you so
course.
much for this great conversation.
It went well. I'm glad. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Of course.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.